Here we go. Here we go. Can you believe it? I've done it yet again, everybody. I've done it yet again. I managed to hit the button. I hit the button that lets me do this streaming, and everything's streaming now, and we're streaming. Can you believe it? It's happening. Holy cow. Another day of streaming. As always, my Wednesdays are half-price wings, chilling out in my neighborhood, going to the beach, taking a look at the sky, trying desperately to disconnect from the system of capital, sending little presents to friends, which is always really nice to do. Always makes me feel good, right? That's one of the things that I really love. You know, I think about these capitalists all the time, and I'm just like, dude, if I had the kind of money that these guys had, I would just be giving it away, like hand over fist, constantly. That's how you know these guys are like as embarrassing as it gets. Right, that's how you know these guys are as embarrassing as it gets, because they're just not giving their money away. And that's literally all that I would do, is I would give my money away constantly. Hey, Grinning, how you doing? Nothing feels better. Nothing feels better, you know? I've been talking for a little while about how I'm trying to get a roommate into my space, which will really help me financially. It'll be a big boon. And I can't help but feel that I'm just going to end up, like, handing money to people all the time. I love doing it. I love doing it. It's like, my challenge, Fiddleford, absolute pleasure to see you, my man. My challenge to the universe, and I say it all the time, God, if you're listening, make me a millionaire. See if I'm full of shit. You want to see if I'm full of shit, universe? You guys want to see if I'm full of shit? Make me a millionaire. See what happens. Because I would love to just walk around handing out money. And my genuine opinion, Ligon Dizzy, absolute pleasure to see you, my man. My genuine position is that the only thing you need to know about our ruling class to know how fraudulent these guys are is that they're not just walking around handing out money. That they don't have somebody who's just literally walking around just being like, here's $100, here's $1,000, here you go, here you go, here you go, here you go, here you go. And of course, the conservative, far-right, libertarian, Nazi position is, well, if you just give money to people, then they're just gonna waste it. They're just gonna spend it on drugs and alcohol. That's what they're gonna do. Well, we have been running that experiment. We have been running that experiment, right? A BC study gave 50 homeless people $7,500 each. Here's what they spent it on. Compton, absolute pleasure to see you. Grinning says Sanders would be a centrist if he advocated for limited property rights. That meme is a little too gracious. Yeah, I think the meme is trying to make a point. That's all. The meme's just trying to be like Bernie Sanders, right? He's kind of in the middle. Right? He's kind of in the middle. But the truth is that literally everywhere else, Bernie Sanders is like a moderate right. Like, that there isn't really a centrist. Like, we're so far to the right that even the centrists are not permitted into the conversation. Right? Like, it's just not allowed to happen. The infamous, good to see you, my man. If somebody gave me $5 billion, the CIA would have to eliminate me. Absolutely, absolutely. A new BC-based study undercuts the persistent stereotype that homeless people can't be trusted with cash, according to the lead researcher, who says it also highlights a different way to respond to the crisis. Dr. Zheying Zhao, an associate professor of psychology at the University of British Columbia, was part of a team that gave 50 homeless people in the Vancouver $7,500 and then followed them for a year. The jumping off point, Zhao said, was a survey in which respondents estimated that if homeless people were given this amount of money, they would spend 4 times more than their non-homeless counterparts on so-called temptation goods. This is my favorite thing. Have you guys noticed this about capitalists and capitalism, right? Is that they're all a big part of the death cult is the puritanical nature of it, that if you spend any amount of money on enjoying yourself, that's bad. if you actually enjoy yourself for any amount of time. So if you, certainly if you buy drugs or alcohol, but even if you do like video games or any of that kind of stuff, right? Sitting down and watching sports or anything, right? This is seen as a vice, right? That well, this is just human vice at play, and there's nothing you can do about it, right? But certainly if you buy drugs and alcohol. So if you enjoy yourself for even a moment, well, that's time that you could spend working and what they call improving yourself, which means finding out how to make more money from for the death cult, right? Increase productivity. That's the only thing that has any value whatsoever. And it's very simply because if you actually were to enjoy yourself, if you were to reach a position in your life where you were fine, just as you are, right? Like that you just were existing in the world and you were happy with that, right? You go and you sit on the beach and you stare at the sky and you're happy with that, right? You have like a modest television and like a modest sort of setup where you enjoy whatever media exists, and that's fine, right? You have no ambition beyond just making it through this reality and then, dying as we do with some dignity. Well, that's a problem for the capitalists, right? Because the capitalists need you to consume. They need you to consume. They need you to make as much money for them as possible. And the only way that they can make money is through your discontent. Because if you're discontent, right, if you're bored, if you're angry, if you're frustrated, if you're horny, if you're experiencing any array of human emotion, well, then we can sell you a product. Right? And whether that's Eat, Pray, Love, or whether that's the 12 Rules for Life, or whether that's just a video game, or some alcohol, or some weed, or some psilocybin, or whatever, right? We certainly can't allow people to have access to that without earning it. They gotta earn it. They gotta suffer for a period of time, and then they can do it. So if you just give people money and then they go enjoy themselves, that's somehow seen as a problem, because you're cutting out the middleman. But it turns out that's not even what's going on. People in general don't trust those in homelessness. We think that when we give the homeless people money, they're going to squander it on drugs and alcohol. That's a deeply ingrained distrust, and I think it's unfair, and it's not true, Zhao told CTV News. Yeah, it's almost like we're under the thumb of a gigantic propaganda system that doesn't want you to understand that homeless people are regular people. Right? They're normal, everyday citizens who have been victimized by a system of capital. And you have to treat them like something else, right? So that's why we don't call them homeless citizens. We call them the homeless, right? Okay, so that we can render them into a subclass of people. This distrust, along with stereotypes about who becomes homeless, how and why, is partially why there is widespread resistance to the idea of a potential policy solution that would provide no strings attached payment. The cash transfer is such a no-brainer, but nobody is willing to try it, Zhao said, explaining why she felt so strongly that it was important to do this particular study of spending. We spend billions in a year to manage homelessness, and that investment is not getting good returns because the homelessness crisis is only growing. So what did the research show? When we talk to these people, they know exactly what they need to do to get back to housing, and they just don't have the money, Zhao said. They did not spend more money on alcohol or drugs, contrary to what people believe, and instead they spent the money on rent, food, housing, transit, furniture, a used car, clothes. It's entirely the opposite of what people think they're going to do with money. Oh man, it's almost like the system of propaganda lies constantly, and it's just full of delusional liars. The participants who were given cash were compared with 65 homeless people who did not get the payment. Those who got the payment did not spend more money on temptation goods. Enjoying yourself is bad. Spent 99 fewer days homeless, increased their savings, and spent less time in shelters, which saved society $777 per person. Wow, the divine number. A triple divine number, no less. 777, according to a news release from UBC. The study did not include people who are entrenched or who have serious addictions on mental health issues, Zhao noted, adding people who fit that criteria do not make up the majority of homeless people. So yet another myth busted about homeless people, right? Everybody walking around saying, I'm going to save this one. I'm 100% saving this one. Everybody walking around being like, well, homeless people, they got mental illnesses, you know. Well, not according to the people who are actually researching the issue. The people who were actually researching the issue said people that fit the criteria of homelessness do not make up the majority of homeless people. Homeless people are not that different from us. It's almost like they're just regular citizens. Something terrible happened and they had nothing to fall back upon, she said, citing eviction or the loss of a job due to illness or accident as some examples of how people lose their housing and struggle to find somewhere else to live. Capitalism. Particularly in a rental market like Vancouver, where prices are sky high and vacancy rates are low. The exclusion of people who are most visible and often described as the hardest to house is something Zhao says is a weakness of the study, because it means there is no data on how or whether cash transfers would be similarly effective for this population. Nor is there any evidence about how they would spend the money if it was provided. We don't know. There's no evidence, and this is something to consider, she says. Still, Zhao says having data on how people who did get the money actually spent it is something she thinks will help counteract stereotypes, increase empathy, and potentially get skeptics and the public on board with the idea of providing cash transfers. Now that the study is complete, the plan to replicate it and expand it to other cities in Canada and the U.S. I mean, that'll be until the Conservatives get in and destroy everything, right? Like, that's how this is going to go. Let's be really straight, right? The Conservatives are going to come into power and they're just going to destroy the whole thing. That's how they roll, right? That's their plan. That's their idea. That's their thought, right? Make everything worse for everybody and force everybody to work for owners harder. That's the capitalist dream right there. And the person who sells themselves the hardest is the best, right? What experiment are you going to conduct, Cotton? What are you doing out there, my man? Crow Guy says, maybe we should just give the land back to the natives. I mean, couldn't be worse. Couldn't be worse than what we're doing now. Fiddleford says, but when the economy is rigged towards consumerism, which these capitalists are proud of it will be a genuine difficulty to not do as the economy needs, which is to consume. Consume! Yeah, when you actually think about how our economy is structured, it's essentially structured to measure destruction. That the more you destroy, the better we do. Like that, according to us. Like we say, the more destruction we wrought on the universe and the world around us, the better we are. It's a death cult, after all. Yeah, commodifying real life itself, which is creepy. Yeah, we've been doing that all along. They'd sell the air to us if they could. Just wait until fetuses can go in debt. Yeah. Fiddleford says, yes, lovely to bring it up, but it is not the opposite of what this economy ran on consumption ideologically. I don't think I know what you mean by that, my man. The infamous. When you do things to improve yourself, such as doing strength training, they'll call you a meathead. Yeah, you can't win for losing. There's always a way to criticize. There's always a way to criticize. That's the thing. One of the things that I've learned, Michael Parenti really hit this on the head. Michael Parenti really, really hit this on the head, where when the Western world talks about communist nations, they ensure that the communists can't win, right? That there's no position that the communists can actually win in. So if the leader of the country lives in a very modest circumstance, right? He lives in a small house, doesn't have a lot of wealth, isn't very ostentatious, doesn't drive fancy cars, right? Is just sort of like a normal person, but it happens to also be the leader of the country, right? Then they point at him and say, well, look how poor the country is. Even the leader is in poverty, right? But if the leader does live in a palace, right, maybe he moved into the royal palace, right, so he lives in a palace, and if he does surround himself with ostentatious things, he has nice cars, he does use his wealth and his position as most world leaders do, well, then he's abusing his power, right? So you can't win. And that's on purpose. That's on purpose. The assumption always is that you're wrong. Because it's a form of gaslighting at the end of the day, right? They're not interested in interacting with you in a way that delves into the truth. They're not interested in compromise. They're not interested in understanding. They're not interested in any of that. They're interested in gaslighting you, plain and simple, to ensure that you are constantly in a position where you are constantly on the defensive. Instead of recognizing that these people are frauds, that what they say is fraudulent, that the best thing that you can do in your life is to ignore them and not allow them into your consciousness at all. They don't have the right to be listened to. They are overt, obvious frauds. They have no ideas. They refuse to acknowledge the problem exists. And if they do acknowledge the problem exists, they say that you're the problem. Under no circumstances should these people be taken seriously. And if you're not willing to come up with ideas to the problem, then it begs the question, why should we listen to you? Under what circumstance do we have to listen to these people and respond to what they say when they have no ideas or thoughts and are, frankly, quite boring, right? I don't understand why we tolerate them in the media space whatsoever, and yet there they are. Content writes, speaking of vice and welfare abuse, I remember my dad railing against welfare abuse when I was younger. I asked him if we should have a character court to make sure only the right people got welfare. Yeah. Brutal. Like, brutal. And here's my perspective on it, right? Like, let's say we got somebody named Crystal in my chat, writing in a language that I cannot read. Good to see you, Crystal. I hope you're saying something beautiful in your language. And I don't know what language that is. It's very loopy. It's very like. Anyway, I won't even try to take a stab at it. Where I'm just going to insult you. Look, my position on this is as simple as it gets, right? Who cares? Like, who cares? If these guys take this money, if they take the money and let's say they go buy drugs and alcohol. Let's say we give them $1,000 and they take $1,000 and they buy $1,000 of drugs and alcohol, right? And they consume $1,000 worth of drugs and alcohol. Oh, okay. So they've just taken $1,000 and they've created economic growth in the alcohol and drug sector, right? And what's that going to do? It's going to expand that sector of the economy, right? You're going to create a culture around that, right? Which is not much different than what currently exists. So they're just engaging in a system that already exists and expanding that kind of economy. And then before you know it, you just have an economy that's based on the distribution of drugs and alcohol, which is, again, not much different than what we currently have. And the only reason that you can stand up and say, well, that's wrong to do and we shouldn't have that, is if you have a moralist position on drugs and alcohol that I don't have. Do as much drugs as you want. Drink as much alcohol as you want. Drink yourself to death. I don't care. It's your life. Do what you want, right? And if you come to a place where you think to yourself, okay, this drugs and alcohol, they're not helping me. I'm not getting what I need or getting what I want out of these anymore. And then you decide to stop doing them. Well, good for you. That's fine too. Right? I don't have a moralist position on this stuff that other people seem to have. And it's especially bad when it's the people who are like guzzling Bud Light that are saying this kind of stuff. They're like guzzling 24 cases of Bud Light a day, telling people, oh, well, if we give money to the homeless, they'll also drink as much as I drink. Like, who cares? I don't care at all. Go right ahead. Right? But we've seen now the evidence is in, right? Yet another piece of evidence to show something that we here on the left have always understood, that we understood completely and we understand completely. Homeless people do not buy drugs and alcohol with money that's given to them. Certainly not more, right? Certainly not excess. What do they do with it? They buy food and shelter and clothes and cars, right? They engage in the economy again and they reintegrate themselves back into the economy. Why? Because it's a better way to be. It's nicer, isn't it? Yeah, then be shamed for doing so. Pretty sure the Federal Reserve of gold is what controls everything. No. The gold standard no longer exists, Crow Guy. Although the Federal Reserve is an important institution within the system of American hegemony, the gold standard has not been, we haven't been on the gold standard since the 70s. And we've been on a fiat currency, right? And that fiat currency is, the justification for getting onto a fiat currency is always that it's more agile. It's, you can do more with it. You can respond to crises faster. And all of this is true, right? Of course, the criticism of getting onto fiat currencies is that we are not responsible. Like, we're not responsible governors. We're not very good at being governors, especially here in the West. And so the currencies go out of control very easily, which they do, and they have. and they're going to continue to go that way. The benefit of a gold standard is that there's a limit. There's a hard cap on what you can and cannot accomplish, right? And that moving gold around is actually quite difficult to do. That you can't just in a day move gold from Russia to America and then back over to Japan, right? Like, you just cannot do that. And so you've got to create a fiat currency. But even the currencies that are attached to the gold standard have this sort of understanding of, like, there's only so much gold, right? There's only so much gold that exists in the world. And unless you dig up more gold, unless you find more gold and increase the gold supply and increase gold quantity, gold is fairly stable, right? That's the benefit of the gold standard and why people advocate for the gold standard, because it's limiting. It limits the amount of activities and it limits the amount of stuff that you can do. Whereas fiat currencies allow you essentially to infinitely print money until everybody finally recognizes that the money has no value because it's attached to nothing, right? And which is more or less the road that the United States is headed towards. Is just people are beginning to understand that the currency doesn't have any value. And you can see that, like Russia, for example, at the start of the Ukraine war, one of the first things they did is they connected their currency back to the gold standard. Why? Because it's stable. Because there's stability to it. It's very difficult for your currency to collapse if it's pegged to the gold standard, right? Because you have to collapse gold itself to have your currency collapse. So there are pluses and minuses, and we're going to see those minuses happen over the next decade, I think. Conton said, oh yes, about your father. He shut up real quick when I laid down the implication of investigating individuals before we give them welfare. If it's worth that much manpower to find a handful of welfare abusers, yeah, I mean, and define welfare abuser. Like, what is that? Like, is it people who are just enjoying their lives? Like, this is the kind of hysteria-based thinking that comes out of conservatives and the conservative mindset, is that they just so despise the idea of a single individual just sitting on a couch watching TV for their life that they're willing to spend like 5 times the amount to make sure that doesn't happen. It's just so offensive to them to imagine a person who is just like they're fine with that idea if that person murders someone, right? If you put somebody in a jail cell, right? Well, that's justice, and that makes it. But if a person does it to themselves, then it's deeply, deeply offensive. And get over it. Like, just get over it. Like, stop basing public policy on the tiny minority of people who are going to just waste the time they have here staring at a screen in a room, hurting no one. Like, it's wild to me. Like, it's wild to me. Like, these people need to go out and get jobs that don't exist. We need to create jobs that are pointless to make sure these people have to go do stuff. Like, who's the one with the mental illness in this situation? Who's the one that's actually sounding like the crazy person in this situation, right? A guy that's saying, yeah, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to sit on my ass and watch TV my whole life, and life will pass me by, and it'll be over and done with. I have no ambition, right? Is that person crazier than the person who's saying we need to invent jobs to do nothing to ensure that busy work is done for no purpose to justify a person's food and shelter? Like, which one of these two people sound more manic? Which one of these people sound more sane? Like, it's wild. Yeah, take these reactionaries seriously about the cost it would take to actually implement what they say, and they will recognize how draconian and insane it is sometimes. Yeah, I think some people just are there for the suffering, Cotton. I think they want the suffering. You know? I think they do. Crow Guy writes, people work out of fear of becoming homeless, and they feel superior for doing so. Yeah, well, and also I think there is sort of a sense of jealousy, like a sense of, like, if I have to work, so do you. Just straight up. Like, it's how the working class is divided, you know? Like, if I have to work, so do you. And nobody ever thinks, wait, why are we all working so hard? Like, who gives a shit about any of this? Like, we're all working for these pointless capitalists so that they can go shoot rockets at space. And the jobs that we do are more or less, like, without value. They're all sort of pointless, right? We're all just kind of wasting time. That we're, like, shuffling around lattes and flipping burgers, making food for one another, like giving each other little different snackies, like, or shuffling paper around. If you work in the finance industry, you're basically just like putting numbers on one screen to another screen all day. That's basically your whole thing. And it's all just a system of saying, this has value. Yeah, we're all very important, when like none of it matters. It's all just as pointless as it can get. We would all be better off just walking into fields and staring at the sky all day long. And like the tiny itsy bitsy little bit of labor that would actually need to be done in order to accomplish, the food distribution and the maintenance of shelter, right? We could all participate in that. We could literally create a system that says, every so often you're going to have to go to a grocery store and like shuffle some food around, stock some shelves, right? You're going to have to act as a cashier, right? Maybe you're going to have to go out to a field and help pick apples, right? Like maybe that's going to happen, right? Every so often, that'll be part of the agreement that we have with one another, that we're all engaged in the food creation and distribution system, right? It only requires 2 to 4% of the population in order to generate the food that we throw 40% of out, right? So we could do that. It would be easy to do. And then we could literally take the rest of our time and just enjoy our lives. But instead of that, we got to go do this dumb shit nonsense work that has no value for anyone, right? Least of all the people who are actually engaging in it. Like we're an insane society that has lost the plot completely. We're just worshiping money, and it's wild. It's wild to watch. Yeah, Japan being allowed to dump allowed, like just nobody's stopping them to dump radioactive water into the ocean. Yeah, no wonder the ocean creatures are rising up against us. I'm really hoping that I get to see in my lifetime like a giant squid, like a Kraken level squid, tentacles wrapped around an American aircraft carrier. I have this vision in my mind that just keeps coming in. And it would be so cool if we saw like a helicopter perspective camera view down on an American aircraft carrier, tentacles wrapped around this aircraft carrier, just trying to drag it down to the ocean. I hope it happens, man. I hope Cthulhu comes up. It's gonna happen. Nut Milk, good to see you, my man. Kami, your beard game is top notch. Thank you, sir. Thank you. I'm true communists here. We're true communists here. We believe in the power of facial hair, without a doubt. Maybe that's why the Soviet Union fell. Their communists just didn't have the facial hair game. Like they had good, like groomed facial hair stuff, but they weren't committed. Right? They did that. They had like kind of goatees. Stalin had a pretty good mustache going on, right? But then post Stalin, like all these guys, no mustaches, no facial hair, right? Take a look at a guy like Putin, like no facial hair, clean shaven. It's a problem, you guys. It's a problem. Don't trust people with no facial hair. Real straightforward stuff. But that's communism, Favula iPhone. Yeah. Timothy, good to see you, my man. Fiddleford says, do yourselves a math practice. Yearly welfare paid out to people, say 10K. How many workers across different income levels? Match the income of the 10K employed through tax contributions. The industry still benefits. Yeah, have you heard of the Cuban cooperated with the Manitoban First Nations to send doctoral aid, and our government denied it? Yes, I have heard about that. Yeah. I see that you're talking to Fiddleford. Nothing wrong with that. And Rusty, correct to point out, what about corporate welfare abusers? Yeah, when it's a corporation doing it, right? When it's a corporation that gets a bailout, when it's a corporation taking all this welfare and all of this kind of stuff, there's no, that's just reinvesting in the economy. There's nothing wrong with that. And then they take all that wealth and they ship it offshore. Yeah, it's just normal. They earned it. They earned it. Like it is a double standard that certainly exists, and it's absolutely wild to see at this stage in the game. Yeah, Isaac writes, you only get about $550 a month on welfare. Nobody's going to want to be on welfare with that amount. Well, and what's insane, in my view, is that there is like a welfare trap that people can get into, right? That if you start working, you lose you lose the money, right? And like $550, I mean, now it seems like such a small amount of money, but even 10 years ago, $550 was like, you could rent a room with $550. And so we've built a disincentive to work to people. We've said like, yeah, don't go work, just take the 550. And it's wild. Like we want people to live in poverty. It's very straightforward. Mikhail says, couch guy, sounds like me these days. It's not such an easy life psychologically. They think it would be great. Yeah, I mean, that's the other part of it. Like, one of the things that I always say to these guys that are just like, people will just sit around and do nothing. I'd be like, try it. Try it. You go try that. See how long you last, right? Human beings are not built to just sit around and do nothing. It's not what we do. It's just not how we are. It's not how we act. It's not what we do. That a person that's doing that is actually like recuperating from trauma. Like that's what you're looking at. If you're seeing somebody and all they can do is just sit on a couch, right? It's because they've been traumatized and they're dealing with that trauma. That's really what's going on. And because human beings they want to get up and they want to go do stuff and they want to get around and they want to see what's going on around them and they want to engage in a community and they want to engage in a society. And then if they go outside and like right outside their door is like a highway system where there's just like a million cars driving by their place, their air is polluted. There's literally not even grass outside their front door. There was a shooting in the school just down the street. All of the buildings around them are falling apart. There's no industry. There's no commercial anything, right? They literally got to walk a half hour to get to a grocery store. Right? Yeah. I mean, like, what do you think's going on there? Like, you think that these people are highly incentivized to engage in a community that's been actively and systemically destroyed by the system of capital? Like, I don't think so. Don't think so. You know, sometimes it's just people making the best choice for themselves, where they're creating a little environment for themselves in the tiny little space that they've been permitted to have access to, and they want to stay in it because outside their door is a literal war. Timothy writes, I think money should be spent on independent researchers, artists, etc. for the simple reason that the pursuit of knowledge is, well, a good thing. Yeah, I've picked apples in the past. I have too as well, Timothy. It's good exercise. Well, it's good for your soul too, you know. It's just good to be connected to the food system and to be connected to that kind of thing. There's a reason why capitalists don't want artists to be funded, because any artist worth their salt will understand very, very quickly that the enemy of humanity is capital, right? And that'll happen almost immediately. It doesn't take a big, like, you don't need like a big jump like that there's rich people who benefit from systems of poverty. And any artist worth their salt at all is going to begin talking about that and writing about that and making art about that, right? My major critique about modern comedy is that it's essentially capitulated to capital, right? All of these quote-unquote night show comedians, Stephen Colbert, Jon Stewart, people like Bill Maher, certainly, have all essentially capitulated to capital and are basically pro-imperialist. That some of them, Jon Stewart leaps to mind, have been permitted to be critics of the system of capital internally, right? So he can point to something that's going on within the borders of America and say, hey, we should be funneling money towards this, right? But he'll never actually bring up the system of capital in order to talk about that, right? It'll always just come down to we've got to vote harder. So Stewart has managed to find himself in exactly the right narrative position to be able to criticize the empire to a certain degree, but never step over the bounds. Anytime he starts talking about foreign policy, he's basically a CIA agent. Like, he's not much different. That he espouses the narrative of the American empire. He becomes a stenographer for the State Department, pretty clearly, in a black and white kind of a way. No more is that more obvious than whenever he talks about Venezuela. Same thing with somebody like John Oliver, right? And the hard truth is that if these comedians were in the nightclub getting their start, right, starting to begin, and they actually went up on stage and actually began talking about the United States empire, and if they were effective, right, they just wouldn't get hired. right? Maybe they'd be able to have their nightclub thing, and maybe they would build a name for themselves in a small-scale nightclub kind of a way, but they wouldn't get a show, right? They wouldn't be able to get on television, right? They wouldn't be able to actually compete with somebody like Bill Maher, who's just completely capitulated to the American empire. And so the United States and the system of capital is never, ever, under any circumstances, going to create independent artists and independent researchers. They're never, ever, ever, ever going to do that, because they understand that those are their primary enemies. They understand that the major critics of society and the major critics of capital come from the arts. And it's pretty common. Like William Shakespeare stopped writing suddenly, right? And the reason why is because the theater got banned. Right? Very, very straightforwardly. During the golden age, an age that we literally still teach to children, we have the collected works of William Shakespeare, and we put it in front of kids and say, this guy was writing during the 14th, 15th century in England. It was in the middle of a golden age. Right? We don't actually teach kids why that golden age started, which is that the crown gave the peasants money. Right? And what did they do? They spent it on the arts, right? So that allowed people like William Shakespeare to actually write the works that he was writing, amongst other artists. And why did that golden age come to an end? Because the throne began to see that theater was a threat. They began to see that the peasantry was actually beginning to ask questions like, hey, why do we listen to the crown? Why do we listen to the king? Like, why is the king important? This divine right of kings thing, like, so because he's born to this guy, that means that God said so? Okay, so like a little bit of that. And so they banned the practice. They banned theater. And we have effectively done the same thing here in North America. Like, the year that I graduated from theater school, they cut funding for the arts. This was the Stephen Harper administration. Cuts arts funding by as much as 80% in some sectors, right? The justification was always like, well, we don't have the money for that or anything kind of stuff. But we've done the studies. We know for a fact that if you wanted to increase your economy, if you want to increase economic activity in your society, the very, very first thing that you should fund is the arts. For a very simple reason. People go and see shows, and that lets businesses prop up around those shows. Right? You have like a little cafe, you've got a little gift shop, you've got these other businesses that are popping up around. And what's driving activity to that neighborhood? The arts. That's what's doing it. Right? And it's the same justification for why you build transit systems. Right? You build a transit stop, what happens? Businesses pop up around the transit stop. Every dollar you put into transit, you get $3 back. It's the same thing with the arts. Every dollar you put in, you get $3 back. But we don't do it. Why? Because the arts are a threat. The arts are a threat to the system of capital. So we never, under any circumstances, are going to see the arts ever get funded. And so what do our arts turn into? Marvel shit, basically. Just Marvel shit. Where essentially proto-fascist narratives that exist in order to convince the populace that the American military and this overwhelming funding of technology within the American military is justified because there's always an external threat that we have to face, right? No, it makes sense that we have this big, gigantic military force because aliens are coming, right? And now they're literally propagating that narrative into us. That straight up now it is, aliens are coming. Aliens are coming. Speaking of snackies, I got ice cream, pulled pork, pop and chips for free. For free? Good shit, my man. Good shit. The Lord giveth and the Lord giveth away. Right? Taketh away. And in this case, he giveth. You get pulled pork, pop and chips. Dude, I could go for some pulled pork, pop and chips right now. I'll tell you what. Fiddleford writes, pulling fish and traditional foods from the woods for the elders is a good practice. Our indigenous comrades are involved in. Fantastic. I hope the Kraken takes out that carrier named after Reagan first. That'd be great. That'd be super, super great, dude. The Canadian Engels. Hey, man, I'll take it. Although Engels his beard was much more like refined than my beard, right? $550, a good portion of my monthly food bill. Ugh. Welfare trap, 100%. Absolutely. Fiddleford writes, I live on welfare. Me and my fiance get $13K and can, if both working, make up to $500 without garnishing wages, but only when it's $200. They can't take it, what we owe. They cannot collect, actually. That's good to hear, man. Everybody's making it through the best that we can. Ligand Disease says, there are 2 apple trees in our backyard that's just full of apples right now. It's almost collapsing the trees. We have our work cut out for us this September. Dude, what are you going to do with all those apples? What do you do? What do you do with all those apples? That's a lot of apples, my man. Get those apples. Make applesauce. Mikhail writes, I find comedy that critiques capitalism is seen as depressing, so not funny, I guess, but that's because people think nothing can change. I mean, I think the last great political comedian was George Carlin, right? That before him was Bill Hicks. And I think that Bill Hicks really, in many ways, inspires George Carlin. Because you can see George Carlin's comedy. At first, it's not boilerplate's not the right word to use. He was always fairly astute. He was always fairly observant, but it was really just built into kind of an observing media culture, right? Like the 7 words you can't say on television, that kind of stuff. That he never really went after the system of capital until he got older, and once he reached a certain age, he really like. There was a moment where he definitely turns the corner, where he definitely starts saying things like, America doesn't build anything, but we sure can bomb the hell out of you. We can bomb the hell out of your country, right? He starts saying this kind of stuff. And his last stand-up special was straight up just an expose. It was straight up him just going through the entire system of capital and saying, this is what it is. This is what's going on. And we haven't seen another George Carlin because the system of capital is fairly well aware. The system of capital is well aware that people like George Carlin are dangerous, and we've all watched. I think BoJack Horseman, the cancellation of BoJack Horseman should be the moment that we all look at to go, oh yeah, like these guys are never ever going to allow any artist under any circumstances to create even a single piece of art that is anti-capitalist explicitly, right? That you are allowed to create art that is at its core nihilistic, right? You can be like, oh God, what a terrible world we live in. Oh geez, everything's so horrible. We should fight against the horribleness of the natural world and all of that, because that narrative says that capitalism is natural. That narrative says that the system of capital is a normal, natural thing that's normally happening naturally and will always persist and exist. That we live in a state of capitalist realism. And the best that you can do against it is to unionize, to create organizations in order to act as kind of shelters against this natural system that will always persist and will always exist, right? But the moment you actually start to say this isn't natural, this is being generated by people who are specifically upholding a system that we can change, as soon as you start saying that, your show gets canceled. And that's precisely what happened to BoJack Horseman. That it was, at the time, one of the most popular shows on Netflix, and that the creators of the show had said expressly that they were ready to keep making season after season after season of this. And so were the artists on the show, the actors on the show. Everybody was sort of expecting, in fact, that this show was going to become kind of like a Family Guy-esque style show that was just going to continue persisting, that they were just going to keep making episodes of this and keep following this character, BoJack Horseman, as he went through his life. But they began to have serious conversations about the nature of capital. They started to show capitalists for what they are, which is a class of total rapacious psychopaths. And so the show got canceled. And if they are willing to do that to shows that are actually making them money, that are actually popular, that are actually out there, then they're going to do that to everybody, right? And they will smother the baby in the cradle. They will, under no circumstances, if you walk into a room with executives and say, so I'd like to make a show that is a critique of capital, that is expressly anti-capitalist in its inception, then they just won't do it, right? They just won't do it. And part of the reason why a show like Arrested Development, right? Part of a reason why a show like Arrested Development doesn't get the media marketing is because it is expressly anti-capitalist. Well, it's anti-wealth. It's anti-rich people, right? That it is lampooning the wealthy and the rich. It doesn't venerate them. Or at the very least, it doesn't treat them as if they are a natural force that just simply needs to be tolerated. And so it's one of these shows that everybody always said, like, yeah, it's a good show, but nobody actually watched because it wasn't marketed at all. And there's a reason for that, right? There's a reason for that. Was Bill Maher always a hack? No, but like, what's happened with Bill Maher is actually really interesting. Like, the fact that people actually listen to people like Bill Maher or Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro, for that matter, as moral voices, tells you that we are in a moral vacuum. Tells you that we have lost our moral leadership, that there is no one in the society that is even really attempting to stand up and say anything of interest or have any moral credibility whatsoever. Because what we're doing is we're turning to nightclub comedians for our moral guidance and to find our moral position in the world. To find our moral center, we're listening to people like Bill Maher and Dave Chappelle, Jon Stewart, right? We're actually like, yeah, these are the guys. We should listen to these guys and have serious, credible conversation. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, Bill Maher hasn't really changed, right? He's always been this way. And that's fine if you as a people, like, listen to him and go, oh, well, let's listen to what the jester has to say. Let's listen to what the shitty, hacky nightclub comedian whose claim to fame is saying the word sucks on TV for the first time, right? Like that's fine. He can have an opinion. He can have a position. But it's the idea that he's attained a kind of veneration. He's attained a kind of status that he simply does not deserve. He simply does not deserve. Like, Bill Maher's opinion matters less than your mom's. Like, Bill Maher's opinion matters less than your teachers. Bill Maher's opinion matters less than a university professor's. Bill Maher's position matters less than a police officer's or a firefighter's, right? Like, Bill Maher is a shitty nightclub comedian. That's it. You can enjoy the things that he says for what they are, I suppose, but if you're going to actually treat him like he's a priest, then there's that to me indicates a real vacuum and a real hollowness of the actual communication that exists in the society. Bill Maher has no right to be a moral leader of any kind. He's just a smarmy asshole, and that's all he's ever been, and that's fine. You can have smarmy assholes in the conversation, but that doesn't mean that he's right or even interesting, right? Like, to me, that's always been my big thing with Bill Maher. Like, he's just kind of boring. He's not an interesting commentator. He's not that interesting. He just picks up the lowest, like the low-hanging fruit every single time with no deep analysis whatsoever, which is why whenever he has anybody on his show that actually has done deep analysis and actually knows something about the subject, they make him look like a goof, which isn't hard to do. It's not hard to make Bill Maher look like an illiterate boob because he is an illiterate boob. And that's fine if you understand that when you look at him. But if you're going to put your hand on your heart and say, Bill Maher said on his show, did you see what Bill Maher? Oh, well, I'm basing my entire personality on this thing that Bill Maher said. If you find yourself saying that kind of stuff, you need to start reading a book. Like, you need to start reading a book, man. Because, like, Bill Maher's whole shtick is being a shitty, illiterate, smarmy moron. That's his whole thing. I think the best thing that was ever said about Bill Maher came from Norm Macdonald. Norm Macdonald said, of Bill Maher, some comedians think that it's their job to try to convince people that they're really smart. And I always thought that the job of the comedian was to be funny. Compton writes, you know what is funny? When we defund the arts and claim victory for saving money, then why doesn't taxes go down? Yeah. And road and power infrastructure still doesn't improve. That's a tough one, Compton. That's a tough one. The arts now are Taylor Swift charging you a month worth of your salary. Yeah, to see her, like, you know, it's okay. Like Taylor Swift is, like, fine. You know what I mean? But somebody like Taylor Swift always exists in the society. There's always, like, just like the hot, blonde, like, pop star. That has always existed since time immemorial. It's just getting grotesque now. It's just getting to be like the only people who can actually buy the tickets to see Taylor Swift are now the people at the highest echelon of the society. And Taylor Swift gets to say dumb fuck shit like, I didn't grow up in a position of wealth and privilege. And then you see the house that she grew up in and you're like, oh, that's literally a mansion, Taylor. Like, that's literally like a 10-bedroom mansion with like a pool in the back that has a helicopter pad. Like, that's what you grew up in, Taylor. Like this sort of detached, aloof place of privilege. These people, and I think she genuinely, I don't think she's trying to be duplicitous when she says that. I think she just has no idea what the fuck she's talking about. That her entire life has always been singing songs about boys that broke her heart, right? That like she's been doing that since she was a teenager. And again, just like with the Bill Maher situation, there's nothing wrong with any of that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. We just don't have a culture. And so when you don't have a culture, when somebody like Taylor Swift writes something and releases a video, everybody goes, oh, wow, let's pay attention to this thing because we don't actually have a real culture, right? So instead of it being this like interesting thing that's on the side of your culture, right, it becomes the culture itself. Because if you don't have a real culture, then anything fills that vacuum. And there's Taylor Swift, standing inside of her mansion as a 14-year-old girl, writing songs about boys she hates, becoming the most popular person in America, right? Compton says, burn all that funding away and we can't locate where all that money went. Instead, that is better spent. Oh, and let me be really clear about one thing about Taylor Swift, man. Whenever somebody puts some Taylor Swift music on, that's a bop. I'm bopping my head. I think she's got good stuff. I think she's clever. I think she's got good rhymes. I think she's got good instincts musically, right? Just like she shouldn't be like if somebody were to be like Taylor Swift for president, I'd be like, what the fuck are you even talking about? What are you even talking about? The fact that Kanye is in the conversation at all really shows you where we're at. Really shows you where we're at. Ligon Disease says, as somebody who's about to graduate from art school, I can attest that we're taught some quite useless shit. The main ideology of academia is postmodernism, which is an intellectual dead end. These postmodern neo-communists are coming in to spread their woke agenda around. And the woke agenda of the postmodernist communist, the neo-Bolshevik... Yeah, postmodernism, honestly, in my view, has really laid the groundwork for a big, gigantic tax evasion Ponzi scheme. That's basically all it turned into, right? That people are completely allowed now to just like put a banana on the wall with a piece of duct tape, sell that banana with a piece of duct tape for $500,000, treat that $500,000 as a tax write-off for the arts. It's like it's a money laundering scheme, and it's all justified through this system of postmodernism. That like, well, what does the banana mean on the wall? And you paint a canvas red, right? Just one color of red, and put it on the wall. And say, yeah, the color red. What does the color red mean in terms of the aesthetic of the modern blah, 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 blah. $300,000 tax write-off. Like, postmodernism is just a big tax write-off scheme. That's all it is. It's not anybody actually trying to say anything about anything. It's just a bunch of guys trying to justify the existence of all of this garbage, so that billionaires can launder their money through the system. That's it. And everybody just goes, oh, these guys are saying a bunch of stuff, and I don't really get it, and it seems really dumb to me, but they seem to think it's important. Oh, well, I'm going to go off to work. Right? Nobody actually acknowledges that they're literally watching a tax a money laundering scheme in front of their face. It's like the mafia came up with this idea, and we're all just like, yeah, this is normal. This is totally normal. Having a monsoon, are you, radio? I'm sorry to hear that. David Graeber had some interesting things to say about the postmodernism capitalism nexus. I assume he did. We're almost on 7 o'clock here, guys. Good opportunity to say like, share, subscribe. Thank you, Grinning. I appreciate it. Hit the bells, hit the whistles, do all the stuff. Send it around. Let people know. One of the things I've really been noticing a lot is I'll get like up to 100 views on one of these videos, but only 10 likes. I feel like we could do better than that. Be sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Please consider donating to the Patreon. And most importantly, let people know I exist. Tell a friend, tell a family member, tell somebody out there in the world that I exist. Spread the good word. Spread the gospel. Thank you. Appreciate each and every one of you for being here. I really do. Medieval jesters were actually often important advisors to the king. Well, fun fact about jesters is that in a lot of cases, jesters were actually people who had various mental illnesses, right? So you imagine somebody with like Down syndrome, for example, like what we would call Down syndrome. Well, that person would be a jester. They would be allowed into the court. And that medieval populations actually considered these types of people in the society to be, quote unquote, touched by God, that they weren't seen as mentally ill, right? That's not the type of language that was used to describe them. It was that they had a different perspective on what was going on in reality, and that they were touched by God, and there was this understanding that they were more hewed to the truth, that they were less capable of understanding deception and were more capable of cutting through to the truth. And so lots of societies will put these people in as court jesters in the society. If you watch the play King Lear, I've seen the play King Lear mounted twice now, and I've read it several times, and it's pretty obvious that modern culture does not understand or is completely unwilling to actually push its chips into the idea that the jester character in King Lear is a fellow who has what we would call a mental illness. Like you see him done, and most people tend to gravitate towards, oh well, this guy's just like a crass, rude idiot, right? When that's not the case. He's a fellow who probably has autism. Like, he's a fellow who has Down syndrome. He's a fellow who has pick the name of the thing, and that's what's going on there. But to actually mount it that way, and to stage it that way, and to do it that way, right? Who are the people who come to the theater? Liberals, right? They have the money. They've got the capability, and they're the ones that are like, oh, well, we're going to go engage in the culture. It's certainly not conservatives, right? And so what do they not want to see? They don't want to see a person who is has a mental illness on stage acting in this way. That's not what they're interested in. And if you did do that, you would be courting controversy for sure. And so people don't do it, right? People won't do it, even though it's fairly obvious if you actually read the play. You actually understand that, like, yeah, there's something else going on with this character. And Shakespeare does this a lot, that in Twelfth Night, there's a jester-type character in Twelfth Night that they explicitly say he's like a dim-witted fool. He's called the Fool, right? And people explicitly say of him that he has these qualities, that you're just like, yeah, this guy has a mental illness. Like, there's just no two ways about it. And I've seen a film version where Ben Kingsley kind of took a stab at that idea, but it wasn't really committed to in a way that I could say is serious, right? And so this is a phenomenon that persisted in the medieval court system, that there was just this that's why when you get these stories of a king executing a jester, it's actually quite serious, right? It's not a person who takes the cognizant awareness position of I'm going to take the piss out of this king, and there's none of this idea of treason or any of this kind of stuff. It's literally a person who we would call mentally ill saying something the king doesn't like and being executed for it. Like pretty brutal stuff. You gotta go to Texas to see the same kind of stuff happen. I like the fact that Taylor Swift makes the manosphere crowd mad. It's not hard to make the manosphere crowd mad, dude. Like, the position of the manosphere is very simple. Girls are icky. That's it. Like, if you're a little boy, it's not hard to offend you, right? Like, it's not hard to be offensive to somebody whose position is girls are icky and I don't like them. I had a teacher who was lecturing us one day that fascism is on the rise and that we kids must go there and vote harder. Yeah, I mean, it is part of the game, but to act like it's the only thing going out there. Ben says, I thought Kanye dropped out of the presidential race for 2024. Did he? We'll see what happens, man. Who knows what's going on with Kanye? Like, who knows what's going on with Trump? It's really fascinating watching modern politics right now, because it has actually stopped being in some ways it's kind of stopped being just WWE sportsmanship. That Trump has actually broken that dynamic apart a little bit, and now they're actually starting to go after each other in a real kind of a way that the politics of it, like if Trump gets into office, it's not going to help you, right? That's not what's going to happen. But these indictments are serious. Like, these are real things that could definitely affect him. Like, he could actually go to prison. But, like, the things that they are indicting him for are these very sideways kind of legalistic, like, they're not trying to indict Obama for literal drone strikes across the world that are clearly in violation of every treaty that's ever been made, right? They're not trying to go after George W. Bush for the war on terror, right? Like, that's not what they're doing. They're trying to go after Trump for, like, he held on to some documents for a little too long, like that kind of stuff. And it's just this. It has the potential to blow up in their faces in a big and serious way. And if Trump gets into office, like if he wins the next election after all of this, it's going to be a shitstorm. It's going to be a total shitstorm. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be wild to watch. John Gautreau, good to see you, my man. John, I moved from Florida back to Ohio for a new job. Been busy, but finally settled into my new spot. Hope to catch more streams. Always good to see you. Thanks, John. I appreciate that. Good opportunity to say like, share, subscribe. And hey, John, now that you have a new job, how about you think about donating to my Patreon? Wigan to Z writes, academia has you engaging mostly in liberal identity politics, diverting the energy of the working class students away from the class struggle. Yeah, that's the goal of liberalism right now. And that's, if you take a look at the tenure of the liberals, their entire objective and what they did the entire time was to focus on racial or identity equality and lean away from economic equality. That's the goal of liberals. That's what they do. That focusing on identity issues and racial issues and gender issues is not unimportant. Like, I'm definitely not trying to say that these are important issues, but to do that while simultaneously ignoring economic equality, in my view, is just very bleak and nihilistic. It is a way to use people's concerns against them and pretend as though you care about what's actually going on in their lives when really you're just using them. That's all. You're just using them and using their concerns as a shield to actually play this I feel your pain politics while empowering the very forces that are responsible for creating these identity divides in the society in the first place. It's very important for capitalists to have these identity divides, right? That way you can sell controversy and you can sell a fight and you can sell solutions to the conflict that you're creating. But if you actually gave people economic stability and said to them, oh yeah, everybody's got food and shelter, don't worry about that, then these identity politic issues become less heightened. Things become less tense, right? If everybody has food and everybody has shelter, it's not going to cure racism, obviously, but it's going to put less skin in the game for lots of people. People are going to not need to engage in certain types of activity. Certain types of activity is not going to be seen as beneficial. It's one of the analogies that I like to use is if everybody in Gotham City had access to food and shelter and everything was just super nice and fine for them and they were stable, well, if a guy like Joker rolled through and was like, hey, who wants to go do some crimes? I'm a guy who has no superpowers whatsoever and obviously I'm suffering with some kind of mental illness. Who wants to go do some crimes? Well, I think most people would probably go, no, fuck off. Not interested, right? I've got a life here. I'm building, I've got food, I've got shelter. I'm fine, right? But it's because there's this system of desperation that exists in Gotham as created by the Batman in order to allow him to pursue his own obsession with defeating crime that he himself is responsible for maintaining. Which, incidentally, they are now actually outright saying out loud. That the DC universe has finally actually said it out loud. Apparently, if you watch the Flash movie, I haven't seen this myself. My sister told me about this. If you watch the Flash movie, there's a moment where Wonder Woman has the lasso of truth around Batman, and he outright says that I could solve poverty, but then I wouldn't have any enemies to fight. They're saying it out loud now. They know what's going on, and they know what the figure of the Batman stands for. And so instead of actually fighting against these type of economic equality issues, well, what do? They hyper-focus on, oh, well, it's people of color that are committing these crimes. We need to create a more understanding situation. What we need to do is make sure that there's more black people within the system of white supremacy, right? These are the positions of liberalism now. Don't actually get to the root of the issue. Don't actually say, hey, everybody should have food and shelter. Everybody should be stable. Everything should be completely fine. And then from there, we can start to have conversations about the tensions that arise between racial groups. And then we can have that conversation when everybody has some kind of footing, when everybody is on a footing that says you have access to food, you have access to shelter. So it doesn't make any sense to become a drug dealer, to become a gangster, to become this kind of stuff, because that's the only economic activity that actually exists in your society. Those are the only economic opportunities that actually exist around you, right? When you can't get a bank loan, when you can't get access to education, when you can't get access to the wider economy in a serious kind of a way. If we push past all of that and just simply say, oh, are you alive and in the society? Then you deserve food and shelter, regardless of any kind of position, no exceptions, right? But of course, issues like this will never get pushed through in certainly a place like America, because such a policy would actually benefit people of color, and the system of white supremacy won't tolerate it. The Infamous writes, I hate how liberals make fun of Kanye for having bipolar. As someone who has bipolar 1, that shit bothers me. Not that I condone Kanye being buddies with fascists, but bipolar is no joke, man. Yeah, to me, I actually think this is the thing that is so wrong about what's going on with Kanye, is that he's obviously struggling with some kind of issue, but he is a commodity. right? That places that platform Kanye make money doing so. That's the real truth of it. That if you get Kanye West on your show, you're going to get a huge viewer count for that show, right? Even if it is just a bunch of people being like, let's listen to what this guy has to say, right? Like, did you hear what Kanye said? All of this kind of stuff. So it's the system of capital again that is just profiteering off of Kanye West's mental illness, essentially saying like they don't care what Kanye says. They care that a bunch of people are tuning in. And it really did take, finally, Kanye West ending up on Alex Jones' show outright saying he loves Hitler and that the Nazis did a bunch of good stuff, for the system of capital to finally say, okay, we gotta stop platforming this guy. This is the benefits of the financial benefits are being outweighed by other factors. But that's what it took. That's what it took. And it won't be too much longer until huge sections of the society will say, oh, that's what Kanye's saying? Bring him over here. We've got a whole media apparatus for that. We've got a whole media system that's connected into the far right and the Nazis within our society, and Kanye will do great there. We'll be able to sell him there for sure. Right? It won't be too much longer until that's what happens. And in many ways that has already happened. That Kanye is still connected in. It's just that the media apparatus to talk to those people are not as robust as they could be, and as they will get. That they are currently being built, right? Like you think about how far to the right people like Ben Shapiro and people like Jordan Peterson actually are. Right? Think about how far to the right these guys actually are, and recognize that there will be another wave of media commentators. There's going to be another wave of media personalities that are further to the right than those guys. Like that is coming. And when they show up, we're going to have to be here to speak out against them. But it's highly likely that when that wave begins, that we'll also experience a wave of anti-communism that will wipe out people on the left like myself, right? Yet another reason to get connected to the Discord, yet another reason to donate to my Patreon so that you can get connected into the Discord and continue listening in as I continue doing this. John writes, already donated $1, but I'm upgrading as soon as I get my bank account back up after this new landlord bent me over. Yeah, landlords, aren't they the greatest? Well, thank you, John. I do appreciate your donation, absolutely. And I wish I could do this for free, my guys. I really do. I wish I could do this for free. If it was up to me, I would just do this. Like, this is what I would be doing. But tough shit, right? Tough shit. Thank you for your donation, though, John. I do appreciate it, my man. Ligon to Z writes, oligarchs fund campuses like Ryerson, U of T, and OCAD so they have complete say in what is and isn't taught. I can't find anything in my school's course selection system if I search the word Marx. Yeah. I mean, it's that kind of high-scale commitment to illiteracy that has us in big trouble. I got into if you want to call it a conversation, like an internet discourse, let's say, with somebody, and it was very clear that they had no idea what they were talking about, right? Like they just didn't understand the subject, and so they would send me a link to some economics system, and I would just do basic research on it. I'd be like, oh, like literally funded by George Soros and the Bank of England. Like this is what's happening, is that we are supposed to simply believe that institutions that are directly backed by billionaires and the Bank of England are credible, and that if they aren't backed by the Bank of England or the billionaire class, then they are not credible. This type of insistence on illiteracy has gotten quite serious in our society, and the commitment to ensuring that the populace remains illiterate, we're actually seeing a double down. We're doubling down on it, that it's getting more and more serious as time has moved forward. post-colonial studies, feminist studies, LGBTQ studies, indigenous studies. Okay, reading Marx, non-existent. Yeah, exactly. Like, and it is, you do get Marx in sociology because Marx is essentially the founder of sociology. So you encounter Marx in sociology, but you don't actually like get into the economics of Marxism too deeply in sociology classes, because that makes sense, right? You're supposed to be doing economics and economics classes, even though the system of economics doesn't actually teach economics, right? They teach you that capitalism is natural and that there is no system that's better than capital. And who's Marx? Who knows? Mikhail says, I think there was some kind of trademark battle over Kanye's name, which was like an attack on his identity. Yeah, capitalism's creepy like that. Like imagine saying that Kanye's name can't be Kanye. That's wild. That's wild. Hardly surprising to anybody that's been paying attention. U.S. suicides hit an all-time high last year. About 49,500 people took their own lives last year in the U.S., the highest number ever, according to new government data posted Thursday. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention, which posted the numbers, has not yet calculated a suicide rate for the year, but available data suggests suicides are more common in the U.S. than at any time since the dawn of World War II. There's something wrong. The number should not be going up, said Christina Wilbur, a 45-year-old Florida woman whose son shot himself to death last year. My son should not have died, she said. I know it's complicated, I really do, but we have to be able to do something that we're not doing, because whatever we're doing right now is not helping. Experts caution that suicide is complicated and that recent increases might be driven by a range of factors, including higher rates of depression and limited availability of mental health services. But a main driver is the growing availability of guns, said Jill Harkavy Friedman, Senior Vice President of Research at the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Suicide attempts involving guns end in death far more often than those with other means, and gun sales have boomed, placing firearms in more and more homes. U.S. suicides rose steadily over the last 2 decades. A recent Johns Hopkins University analysis used preliminary 2022 data to calculate that the nation's overall gun suicide rate rose last year to an all-time high. For the first time, the gun suicide rate amongst black teens surpassed the rate amongst white teens, the researchers found. I don't know if you can talk about suicide without talking about firearms, Harkavy Friedman said. U.S. suicides steadily rose from the early 2000s until 2018, when the national rate hit its highest level since 1941. That year saw about 48,300 suicide deaths, or 14.2 for every 100,000 Americans. The rate fell slightly by 2019. It dropped again in 2020, during the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic. Some experts tied that to a phenomenon seen in the early stages of wars and natural disasters, when people pulled together and supported each other. But in 2021, suicides rose 4%. Last year, according to the new data, the numbers jumped by more than 1,000 to 49,449, about a 3% increase versus the year before. The provisional data comes from the U.S. death certificates and is considered almost complete, but it may change slightly as death information is reviewed in the months ahead. If the rate is increasing by 4 to 3%, that means it's increasing faster than the economy is. Economy growth is about 1% right now. The largest increases were seen in older adults. Deaths rose nearly 7% in people ages 45 to 64, and more than 8% in people 65 and older. White men, in particular, have very high rates, the CDC said. Many middle-aged and elderly people experience problems like losing a job or losing a spouse, and it's important to reduce stigma and other obstacles to get them assistance, said Dr. Deborah Howry, the CDC's chief medical officer. Suicides in adults ages 25 to 44 grew about 1%. The new data indicates that suicide became the second leading cause of death in that age group in 2022, up from number 4 in 2021. Despite the grim statistics, some people say there is a reason for optimism. A national crisis line launched a year ago, meaning anyone in the U.S. can dial 988 to reach mental health specialists. The CDC is expanding a suicide program to fund more prevention work in different communities, and there's growing awareness on the issue, and it's okay to ask for help, health officials said. There was more than 8% drop in suicides in people's ages 10 to 24 in 2022. That may be due to increased attention to youth mental health issues and a push for schools and others to focus on the problem, CDC officials said. But even the smaller number masks tragedies for families. Christina Wilbur lost her 21-year-old son, Cale, on June 16th last year. He died in her home in Land O'Lakes, Florida. Look, man, people are poor. Like, people are poor. This is the thing. Like, I don't know what to tell people. Like, I'm literally having conversations with people who genuinely think that poverty does not exist. That they just live in this sort of bubble world. Eric, good to see you, my man. Like, at this stage in the game, I'm blown away that the suicide rate isn't higher, frankly. Cotton writes, just want to point out slamming liberal sociology course because they don't have Marx. I wouldn't have come to Marx if it wasn't for abolition of whiteness class. And Yomali Yeshitela. Oh, nobody's slamming liberal sociology. I mean, like, you have to talk about Marx if you're in a sociology course. Like, he's like literally the founder of the science. It would be you would be discrediting yourself as an institution if you didn't. Like, economists tend to ignore Marx because they focus on Smith, right? They focus on Smith, or they'll focus on like Friedman, Milton Friedman. They'll like jump over all of it and just end up at Friedman. But at least those guys were economists, right? And it makes, a type of sense. But if I was to walk into a sociology course and they would just not talk about Marx, I'd be like, oh, bye. I'll get a refund. I don't need to be quote unquote educated by you. Like, at least the economics departments are providing something of an education, although it's an incomplete education. Guns are America's Made program. Ugh. Eric writes, by the way, in the past 2 weeks, I did a deep dive on Caleb Maupin. Good Lord, I knew he was a scumbag, but god damn, I didn't realize how much of an asshole he really is. Brutal. Yeah, again, I don't know too much about Caleb Maupin. I know that he is like a sock dem, right? Or a Nazbol, I should say. Not a sock dem. He's of that ideal that says we should merge communism with kind of MAGA stuff, right? That whole idea that is sort of destined to fail from the outset because the ideologies are incompatible and incoherent with one another. They don't actually work, right? And so all you'll end up doing is poisoning the well, so to speak, for people who are actually attempting to organize along communist lines. I remember once I caught Caleb Maupin. He had gathered together with guys like Haz, and there was like this meeting that they all did, and there was this big sculpture of Abraham Lincoln in the background. According to Google, Auguste Comte is founder of sociology. No, I mean, Marx is deeply embedded. You can talk to I have people who come to this stream fairly regularly who literally have degrees in sociology, and they talk about Marx. Like, if you're talking sociology, you have to talk about Marx. Like, I'm sure that Google doesn't want you to know about it, but Eric says let's put in a book that he wrote. I don't know what you're saying here, bud. Oh, I see. It was 100% anti-Semitic, tried to use Marxism to justify it, and anyone critiqued him, just strawmanned you and accused you to work for the CIA. Like, I just don't care that much about this guy. Like, he doesn't have the influence that I think is necessary. Could mega communism become a legitimate political force on the national level in the U.S. in the coming years? No, I don't think so. Like, not really. Like the goal, it seems to me, of people who are in this sort of MAGA communism position, and certainly a MAGA communist party could not win a presidential election, certainly not. Like it does seem to me like the goal for these MAGA communist types is simply to gain their own personal power and their own personal position, right? Like the moment the communism angle doesn't work anymore for them, then they'll abandon it. Like I genuinely think that these people are opportunists exclusively. Like you take a look at a guy like Jackson Hinkle, or is it Hinkle? Anyway, this kid that kind of popped up out of nowhere, and he's essentially like a MAGA communist guy now. And it's like, but I think that these guys are just opportunists, that they are just saying what is getting energy behind them. And if it wasn't giving them energy, or if it was dragging them down, then they would get rid of it. And I think that there's probably a lot of desperation going on, right? And there's probably a lot of people who are just happy to hear people talking about communism. And the argument that they posit is we should be reaching across the aisle, right? That's the language that they'll end up using. But we all know historically what happens, right? Like if you analyze history for even 2 minutes on this subject, when the far right and the far left get into the same room and attempt to organize with one another, it's the far left that is sacrificed every single time, right? It's what I keep saying. You can't actually organize with Nazis, right? You aren't using them; they are using you. That's the hard truth, right? That's the hard truth. And if you think that you are actually gaining headway, if you think that you are actually making inroads with far right people, then more the sucker are you, more the fool are you. That you are the one that's actually being deceived. You are the one that's actually going to be betrayed, because that's what's happened every single time. That you are basically going to end up, at best, handing political power to neo-Nazis. And that's at best, right? And that's how it's always gone, and that's how it's always been. That you are not using the far right is using you. And that's how it goes. But like, you have organizations like the CIA, like you've got like big, massive scale, like even Donald Trump, like the Republican Party is extremely anti-communist. Like we're going to go through like McCarthy style purges before we experience something like a mega communist party or something like that. Like there's going to be like major attempts to purge the society of any kind of communist upswell of any sort. So this idea that we're going to see like this is why I think the mega communism thing is a waste of everybody's time, right? That what communists should actually be doing is preparing for the purges. That's what we should be actually doing. This idea that we should be reaching across the aisle, and what we should be doing is muddling the water and muddling that kind of stuff. No, we should be forming barricades. We should be creating ideological safe zones. We should be creating places where we can be safe. We should be creating places where we can be heard, and we know we're going to be taken seriously. Because at the end of the day, when the communist purges come, the Republicans are not going to back us. They're not going to sit there and be like, oh, but mega communism. That's not what's going to happen. Like, and the people who are promoting this idea of mega communism, right? The opportunists like Jackson Hinkle, who are putting forward this idea of mega communism, when push comes to shove, they're just going to repudiate their communism and suddenly become far-right fascists, right? That they'll stand up and they'll start releasing videos like, I used to be a communism, but now I'm not, right? Like that's what they're going to do. And they're going to make a bunch of content about why communism doesn't work, and it's basically just going to be CIA propaganda, right? Like that's the trajectory for these guys, and that's what they're going to do, because it's for them, it's not about a goal or maintaining anything ideological. It's not about spreading a message into the society that says food and shelter should be free. It's not about spreading a message into the society that says everybody should have economic opportunity. Everything should be easier for everybody. Wages should be higher. These capitalists shouldn't have the power that they have, right? That isn't what it's about. It's about their own personal power and their own personal prestige. That's what it's about. It's about their own ability to be connected into a media system, and their own ability to be seen, and their own idea to be popular, right? It's about their own fame. It's about their own wealth. And if suddenly it becomes the case that being a communist is a political death sentence, then suddenly they won't be communists, right? And the reason why they're making inroads into the mega system, into the mega people, is so that they'll have a safety net, so that they'll be able to step in to the far right and be welcomed there, and they'll be recognized. And they'll be able to spread an anti-communist message more successfully, right? Because they'll be like a trusted voice, and people will be able to say, like, yeah, that guy used to be a commie, but we convinced him, right? Because, and what it really shows you, if you ask me, is it shows you how the Democratic Party is a dead end. That if the Democratic Party was actually interested in communist ideas, and was actually a place where communists could succeed, and was actually a place where communism could make any inroads whatsoever, no one would ever, under any circumstances, make this move, right? But it just shows you how the Democratic Party is, in fact, a dead end for leftists of all kind. Eric writes, I do agree he isn't that influential. He still has 25,000 people subs his channel. As a result, he's still somewhat influential. Creates confusion with potential allies. Midwestern Marx was influenced by him, and his baggage book, Bread Tube Serves into Imperialism, which explains why Eddie is falling for the patriotic socialism. I mean, I think the patriotic socialism angle is quite natural. Like, people want to believe that their own countries and their own nations are good. They want to believe it. People want to believe that. They want to believe that most people in the society are interested in serving the side of good. They want to believe in a narrative legacy of their own history that shows that the arc of history bends towards truth and justice. They want to create a narrative that says we can be good, right? They don't want to do what I do, which is to say that the American empire has always been a demonic force. It has always been a dark, bleak evil, that white supremacy has always created war and death, that even the people who we venerate as being the good amongst us, like Abraham Lincoln is the one that we point to, were dark, sinister, psychopathic murderers. Like, if we wanted to be honest about the history of the American empire and the American imperialism, it's closer to the Star Wars empire than we'd like to think. It's closer to that than like when I was growing up, I would say that kind of thing, and people would say, oh, but that's just like a cartoonish over-representation. It's so hyperbolic. And no, it's not. It's not hyperbolic at all. In fact, I actually think they go pretty soft in the Star Wars Empire series and in the movies. That the Death Star showing up and blowing up a planet is like, that's not even close to hyperbolic. That's exactly the type of shit that the United States does. It's exactly the type of shit that the British used to do. It's exactly the type of things that the French used to do. The Germans. It's exactly the type of shit that these empires would get up to. And so this idea that we should take the the economic social science of Karl Marx, that we should take Marxism and somehow attempt to merge it with a false narrative that doesn't exist about the goodness and the nature and the patriotism of our own country. It's just incoherent garbage. And the only reason you're doing it is because you're not grown up enough, right? You're not grown up enough to actually realize how bleak and dark your own society has actually been throughout its history. Like, imagine if a Japanese person stood up and said, "Yeah, we're going to do patriotic socialism. There were good things that came out of the Japanese Empire. Yeah, when we were going into China and chopping off people's hands and all that, there's still good things. There were good leaders, right? But if you just live in a place of fantasy, just sort of this childish fantasy, then you can kind of do what you like, more or less." Cotton writes, just like what happened to the log cabin Republicans in Texas, if the right is happy to throw their pick under the bus, they will do the same to right-wing commies. Yep. Like, there's no... and it's I don't understand why we're suddenly supposed to buy into this idea that far-right people are, like, going to accommodate communism. Like, since when? Since when has that ever been the case? Like, I understand, like, there's this sort of narrative of, like, yeah, reach across and convince people on the far right and they'll come our way. It's like, since when? Like, so what can you provide a single example of this actually happening? Like, there are massive, enormous institutional forces that exist in the society and persist in the society that are explicitly anti-communist, that are willing to go to countries and literally level them to the ground and have done so within living memory. Like, what has you convinced that you're going to be able to walk over to their primary supporters, to the very people who uphold the idea that communism is a scourge in the society? And what has you so convinced that you're going to be able to walk over there and be like, hey, no, communism's got some good ideas. We gotta and have them actually become serious allies? Like, that to me is where it gets a bit, like, I understand that there are certain issues in which, like, if they're going to vote one way, you as a communist and the way that they want to vote is in alignment with the way that you want to vote, then yeah, like, that's fine. But don't pretend like they're your allies, because they're definitely not. Because when push comes to shove, they'll send you to the concentration camp. Right? They're not going to have a problem with it either. Right? They're not going to have a problem with it. Like, so if you want to quote unquote organize with these people, and if you want to be like a MAGA communist type, well, there's no such thing as MAGA communism. There's just communists who can get MAGA people to vote along with them for an issue or two, and that's the best you'll ever get. Right? And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with, like, hey, the MAGA people are coming out and doing an anti-war rally. Maybe we on the left should also organize an anti-war rally. And then when the MAGA people want to do an anti-war rally, we can show up with the MAGA people and we'll all do an anti-war rally together. Nothing wrong with that. That doesn't mean that MAGA people are our allies. Right? Because they're not. Eric writes... Oh, hold on one second, guys. Sorry. My dog is coming in. Hey. Who's that? He ran here. Who's that? Hey. Who's that? Who's that? Come on up here, buddy. Oh. 1 second, guys. 1 second. Gotta get some water set up for my little guy. Hey, buddy. Come say hello. Come say hello. Come say hello to the world. Come say hello to the world, my low pants. Come say hello, my man. Hello. Milo's been gone for a little while. Hi there, buddy. Hi there, buddy. Hi there, buddy. Oh, I know. All right. Good to see you too, Milo. He's such a little cutie, guys. Do you guys have any idea what I have to put up with this guy? Let me show you. He's just gonna stare at me for like a period of time. Here he comes. What a cutie. What a cutie. Doggy, I know. Good old Milo. He's been over at my ex's for a little while. Right? Cartoon character, man. All the way down. Nothing derails the conversation more than suddenly Milo. He's in the conversation. When Putin said the fall of the Soviet Union was the worst geopolitical disaster for the world, I think we can agree with him now. When the Soviet Union was around, capitalists were scared. Yeah, they definitely had like a check. There was definitely a check to their power, right? That they couldn't just willy-nilly go anywhere, right? And that what's happened... It's a good opportunity to swing over to this article that I've had up on the screen for some time. Right? This is from Caitlin Johnstone, the Great and Powerful. The last time a foreign military threat was placed near the U.S. border, the world almost ended. Right? Like, if... when the Soviets attempted to do to America what America has done to the modern-day Russians... Right? America literally had their finger on the nuclear button the entire time. Right? And in comparison, the Russians have been like fairly prudent. They've been fairly restrained. The single dumbest thing the empire asks us to believe. The dumbest thing the U.S. centralized empire asks us to believe that the military encirclement of its top two geopolitical rivals is a defensive action rather than an act of extreme aggression. Right? Like, you gotta be like on a kind of a deeply thick level to actually think that this kind of thing is in any way defensive. Like, if you're actually sitting there saying that this is defensive, you are like babbling, foaming at the mouth, crazy, go nuts, absolutely disconnected from reality in any kind of meaningful way. And yet, that's the majority of people. The majority of people would look at this map and think to themselves, yeah, this is a normal thing, right? This is a normal thing. Oh, 1 second, guys. I got my little dog. I knew this was going to happen. 1 second. You've probably eaten, buddy, but you're asking for food anyway. And you know what? You're going to get it. Here you go, my man. You little fatty. Little fatty. Yeah, and when Russia tried to put a nuke in Cuba, it was because America already had a nuke in Turkey. Yeah. No, that gets forgotten. We don't talk about that. Generation Y me. We don't talk about that. Mr. Moon writes, I would love a dog like Milo, but as a renter in Australia, I'm not considered a person deserving of such extravagances. Yeah, I'm fairly fortunate here in Toronto. One of the best things that exists here in Toronto is the Landlord and Tenant Board. And the Landlord and Tenant Board basically said they have a stipulation, and it's straight up all no pet contracts are void. Basically, if you write into a contract that you're not allowed to have a pet, the Landlord and Tenant Board is basically like, no, we void that. We don't care about that. because they were sick and tired of evicting people because they had goldfish and things like this. Just nonsense. Tim Smith, I don't know if I've even seen you here before, Tim. Am I playing Starfield tomorrow? I could care less about Starfield. If the reviews come out about Starfield and everybody's like, oh my God, Starfield, it's the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life, and it's revolutionized the gaming industry in a way that, oh my goodness, and all this kind of stuff. Like, you got to understand, Tim, I am what industry people would call jaded, right? I have things like standards and expectations for how I'm going to spend my time. And I'm not going to spend my time on some half-baked piece of shit that they're overhyping at me so that I'll spend a bunch of money on a game that's loaded with microtransactions and nonsense, right? So until I see people actually saying out loud, oh my God, they're actually delivering on the thing. Like when Diablo 4 came out, right? I watched like a half hour, maybe an hour of gameplay of Diablo 4, and I immediately said out loud, this game looks like crap. This game looks like maybe a C level, like C plus maybe level game that they're obviously shitting out. That if Diablo 4 had have been a free-to-play game, if they had released it on the Path of Exile model, I would have been like, oh yeah, A tier, for sure, like A tier, right? For a free-to-play game that they're releasing with this sort of expectation that they're going to build up over time, that you play for free, and then they've got customization options that you can buy, and they've got things that you can buy on that kind of thing. On that kind of model, Diablo 4 would have been a tier game for sure. But they asked you to spend $60 to $80 on it in order to just walk in the front door. C tier game, like really, really bad. Like right now, I'm playing Baldur's Gate 3. And Baldur's Gate 3 was a $60 to $80 game, depending on the moment that you bought it, and that's a literal masterpiece, right? A literal masterpiece. Like there are people out there, there are game developers out there that are actually making things that are worth playing, that are actually worth our time, that are actually worth our effort, that are actually worth taking a look at, and the capitalists are doing everything they can to destroy it, right? They don't want the consumer, and they're terrified of it. They're terrified of the idea that the consumer base might actually have standards and might actually believe in something like culture and might actually have things like expectations and might actually expect those expectations to be met and might actually value the money that they have in their pocket, right? They're hoping that they can just keep shitting out garbage so that we'll just buy the garbage. But that only works as long as everybody's producing garbage. And when a game like Baldur's Gate 3 comes out and actually says, "Hey, look what games could be. Look what we could actually do. Look what we could actually do. We could actually create like a branching storyline system that actually reverberates throughout the gameplay experience, which actually makes it so that your choices are actually meaningful and that you end up with an ending that is unique and different to the choices and the experience that you have charted yourself out for." We could actually do that. But instead, we're just going to do Call of Duty 53, label it so Call of Duty the thing again, and it's the same game as the last time that you played it, and it's all just crap, garbage dreck that they're just shitting out at you, but you're still spending $60 every single time. And so, am I playing Starfield tomorrow? No. You know why? Because it's going to suck. Because Starfield's going to be a letdown. Everybody's going to be like, yeah, the first 20 hours of it are interesting, but then it goes on a repetitive loop. That it's obviously a grind loop that they're getting you on. And how do I know it's a grinding loop? Because there's no upper level, right? So there's just going to be a grind to it, as all of these things have, because creating a grind instead of a meaningful story or any kind of thing is easy. It's also been successful in the past. Like games like Warframe are still popular, and Warframe is basically just a repetitive loop. Oh, Milo. I knew this was going to happen. My ex doesn't scrap with him. My ex doesn't fight with him. Like she doesn't play tug. She doesn't do any of that kind of stuff. And so the second he shows up, he's like, And like, don't get me wrong, like if you play Starfield, like if you load up this game and you think to yourself, John's full of crap, this game's great, I'm having a great time, right? I'm loving being in this sci-fi setting, right? I'm loving all that kind of stuff, and I'm having a good time with it. Great, fantastic. Like, off you go, right? It's certainly not for me. Like, and I think a lot of this comes down to, and don't get me wrong, I have not done like a lot of looking into Starfield. Like I have not done that. I haven't done research. I don't really know much about it, frankly. I've seen like literally 15 minutes of gameplay, maybe at most. Like, I don't really know what the systems are. I don't really know what the loop looks like. I don't really know. All I know is that I no longer trust the studio. That's the hard truth, is that I don't trust the studio. I don't trust their ability to make a competent choice. I don't trust their ability to make a good game. I don't trust their ability to tell a good story. I don't trust their ability to make a good product. And so I don't see why suddenly they'll like turn the corner and do something good here. Right? Right. And then Armored Core, right? I've seen Armored Core gameplay, and I've definitely thought to myself, that game looks great. I don't think I'm willing to spend the money on that game. Like, when it goes on sale, I think I'll pick it up. And I think that's mainly because like the sci-fi, like big mech kind of gameplay is just, it doesn't hit me in the right spot. Like, it's just, and that's just personal preference. That's not a knock on the studio or anything like that. It's just literally, it's not what I'm here for. But definitely, like, I look at Armored Core 6 and I'm like, yeah, that looks great. But even moreover, I can trust that it is going to be good because it's made from a studio that I actually trust. Like, I know exactly what I'm going to get out of FromSoft. I know exactly what they make. I know exactly what they produce. I know exactly how they work. And when they produce something, it's going to be a good product. It's going to be a FromSoft game. It's going to have its perspective, and it's going to come from that angle. But they're not going to let me down. I'm not going to play 2 hours of it and realize, oh, this is the whole game, right? And which is what more or less what I expect to see happen with Starfield. That you'll and what I expected from Diablo 4 and what I expect from all of these guys now is that you're going to sit down, you're going to play it for 2 to 10 hours, right? I'll be nice to them and be like, okay, 10 hours. And after about 10 hours, you'll be like, oh, this is literally the whole game. That it's just more of this, and that maybe your character will get bigger lights and like things will get shinier. And so you're on this sort of epic grinding quest to become bigger and shinier as time goes forward. And that there's no upper echelon, and so you can just get bigger and shinier, and things get shinier and bigger, and into this absurdist kind of range of craziness. And oh my god, right? And again, that's completely fine if your game is free to play, right? Or if it's really cheap, like if it's like $5, right? Like, that's fine. But if you're gonna actually sit there and tell me we're gonna charge you $60 to $80 for a video game that other game studios are actually making for free. Like, Diablo 4 was actually an insult to people. People should be insulted by Diablo 4. That Path of Exile is a free-to-play game, right? And Path of Exile has flaws. Like, it's a grinding game where you continuously grind up and you get bigger lights, and the gameplay loop is basically the same, right? Like, it's kind of the same thing again and again and again. You get on that grinding loop, right? But the game's free to play. So if you want to get into that grind set and you want to get into this kind of like go up the chain and like get bigger lights and build a bigger character that's crazier and crazier and all that kind of stuff, great. There's a free to play option. It's right there in front of you. You can do it right now if you want, right? And so for Diablo 4 to like open up the door and be like, hey, we've got exactly the same thing, except you got to pay us $80. It's an insult. And you should consider it an insult. So what have I seen about Starfield that convinces me this is going to be any good? Not a goddamn thing. I don't trust the studio. I'm not going to spend $80 of my money to be given a game that should have been free in the first place. And like a lot of this like Call of Duty stuff is like this now. Like, there is literally no reason why a game like Call of Duty should be releasing a new game every year. It's just zero reason, right? The only reason they do it is to basically tax their player base and give them a $60 charge. Like, we literally could have like a Call of Duty permanent studio. Like, we could have a state-funded organization where there's just Call of Duty servers that just exist and that they just make new maps every so often, and they're just focused on like continuously building and fixing this kind of thing, and that's just what they do, and that's just how it is, and it's just built in, and there's a server for this. You could have it for FIFA, you could have it for John Mann's NHL, or NFL rather. You could have NHL, you could have every single type of game that exists within your consciousness. You could literally just have servers set up and constantly being updated for free for the player base. But no, we got to pay these worthless capitalists who do nothing important. Right? That's how this actually works. Right? Like, and I don't think Starfield is going to be any different. Like, what was the last good game Bethesda actually made? Like, for real, what's the last good game that Bethesda actually managed to make? And I'm not asking that rhetorically. Like, I'm actually asking you guys. Like, there was Skyrim, right? And Skyrim was a good game for its time, but now it seems quite dated, which makes sense. It's been 15 years, so it should seem kind of dated. But since Skyrim, what? And we've even got Oddity Morrowind. Like, Fallout 4 had promise. Like, Fallout 4 had promise, but like, it wasn't like my face wasn't getting blown off about it. Like, Fallout 4 was good enough that I think I played it and I felt like it was a fine experience, right? It felt fine, but like, and yeah, and then Fallout 76 was just total trash. And then you also had the Elder Scrolls Online, which was total trash. So like, okay, so let's capitulate on Fallout 4. Okay, Fallout 4 came out what, like 8 years ago? Like longer? What have they done? What have they done that should convince me that I should actually play this game and that it's actually going to be good? Right? Because it's the same thing that I saw with Diablo 4, is that, oh, John, it's new. It's new. We should all play it because it's new. How about no? Is it good? Milo. And the reason why I'm like popping off on this one, right? And I don't mean to be mean to you, Tim, because I feel like you were asking in a pretty genuine sort of way, right? And that you might be hype. You might be hyped for Starfield. Like, I'm not trying to rain on your parade or anything. But I'm just so sick and tired. Like, I'm so sick and tired of capitalists treating us like we're dumb. Like, treating us like we're just like... Because one of the things that is happening, and I have to acknowledge this, even as a gamer, right, is that these games are getting to the point now, like, they are escapism, right? It is escapism, but they are. But the escapism is getting so convoluted and so intricate, and there's a depth to the escapism now, where it's starting to become. And I'm seeing other Marxists actually comment on it, and they're right to comment on it. That they're saying, how bad are things getting that the commitment to escapism is getting so aggressive? We're getting so entrenched in the idea that and how much resources and how much wealth and how much are we putting into the idea of creating these false worlds? Like, it is starting to get to the point where the amount of resources that we're actually putting in to make video games in the first place, if we actually just committed those resources to resolving poverty and homelessness, we probably could, right? We probably could. And so I'm more or less getting to the opinion that if I'm going to spend time enjoying something in an escapism kind of a way and like go into another world, right? I want it to actually count. I'm not just going to spend my time sort of jerking off to whatever. Milo, bud. You're being so disruptive, and I knew you were. I knew you were going to. I knew you were going to, my man. I love you, buddy. You're a good boy. I know. Oh, the reverse sneeze. Bring you over so everyone can hear you. There it is. Oh, I know. Oh, I know. Oh, I know, my man. I love you too. I know, buddy. I know. I know. It sucks what we did to your face. Here's your capitalist innovation right there. You good, my man? You good, my man? You good, my man? Yeah. Good boy. Why don't you come snuggle up, will you? Why don't you come snuggle up, man? Huh? You want to come lie down? You come lie down? Come snuggle up. You're a good boy, Milo. You are. You're a good boy. Come snuggle up. And like, don't get me wrong. Like, if you're taking a look at Starfield again, and a big reason why I'm happy to sort of sideline Starfield is because it doesn't. I look at it and I'm just like, nah, like it's not my jam, right? You want to get me like hype for something? Like medieval fantasy, like medieval fantasy. You're gonna find me playing a lot of medieval fantasy games. That's where I live. That's where I love. Most of the games that I have purchased and that I have played in the last 3 years, medieval fantasy. Like, and it's just how it is. So when you come at me with like sci-fi, alien, science fiction, I'm just like, I don't care. It's just not my thing. It's not my jam. And so in the first place, like there's that. But I just haven't really seen anything from a strict mechanical. Like what's Starfield's pitch is that there's all these planets. So how is it different than Endless Sky, right? So there's all these different planets. You go to the planet, you get resources from the planet to build up your tech, to go to a different planet to continue the gameplay loop, right? And then you just kind of keep doing that. And so you're building like a little survival world of your own out in space. So it's like pretty Minecraft. But with space lasers and guns. Like, okay, if that's your jam, that's your jam. I'm not going to spend $80. Mikhail writes, video games that have empathy built in teach players how to be more empathetic. Video games that are immorally violent seem to be able to influence some to be aggressive. Well, I actually think it's the reverse of that, Mikhail. That the people who are violent gravitate towards violent. Video games. That it's not the games that make them violent. It's that they gravitate towards that direction. And I've noticed that in my own life, that the periods of time when I was feeling the most aggressive and the most violent was when I was playing the most aggressive and the most violent games. And then when I would try to play those games when I wasn't feeling that way, I would just not be interested in them. Like, I can't really play Grand Theft Auto 5, for example. Like, and I actually think that Grand Theft Auto 5 is a good game. Like, this is the thing that's interesting, right? Like, Grand Theft Auto 5, mechanically, from a storytelling standpoint, for what it is and for what you get, it is a good game. And I could actually go so far to say that I would recommend something like Grand Theft Auto 5 if that's the experience that you were looking for. But I just am not interested in playing that game because the entire time you're playing it, you're like an aggressive psychopath, right? And it's like unabashedly so. And not like aggressive with this sort of sensation, like the way that Doom works, where you're like being aggressive and you're killing a bunch of stuff, but you're like demons, right? Like you're killing a bunch of demons. And so your aggression has a sense of righteousness associated with it, where sure, you're just like taking guns and blasting the demons of hell, but at least you're on the side of goodness. Grand Theft Auto 5 is like straight up like, no, you are like a nihilistic psychopath. Like Trevor is a nihilistic psychopath that does psychopathic things. Like you're a serial killer, and your character is a serial killer. And so I just can't play that game. It's just not how I am. Like right now, I'm going through my second playthrough of Baldur's Gate 3, and I have chosen to be like an amoral psychopath. There's actually an origin character that you can be that has this storyline where you actually are like infected by like evil thoughts, and evil things happen around you a lot, like a lot, and you are responsible for those evil things happening. And every single time it happens, I feel bad. Like I feel bad. Like I genuinely feel guilty as a player. Like I'm enjoying the story that's unfolding, and I'm enjoying what's happening, and I'm enjoying the nature of the storytelling and all that kind of stuff. But when my character does something that is bad, it makes me feel bad. And I don't want to feel bad when I'm playing these games, right? I want to feel like there's some kind of goodness in all of this. 1 second, guys. Milo, bud, you were just down. I'm streaming right now, man. We're going to take you down shortly, okay? You were just down. You're a good boy. Come lie down. Cotton writes, no, man, you start at Morrowind and follow the design philosophy, and they are measurably dropping off since Oblivion. Skyrim was good, but it was no Oblivion. Fallout 4, even less so. For me, the thing about Skyrim was that it really executed, like Oblivion was good because it had like an open world sort of system, like this, the world was very open, but Skyrim really created elevation, right? Mountains, like it added in like a whole new layer. And so Skyrim and because also like you go back and play Oblivion, and it's pretty clear that people who are like rah Oblivion do have like nostalgia glasses on. Oblivion has a lot of flaws. It's an excellent game, but it does have flaws. And they're the type of flaws that when you're a kid, you're like, oh, this is just how it is, let's just move on, right? But now we're in a place where like those flaws are apparent, and it's like when you go back and play like a PlayStation game, right? Like it's pretty obvious that it's a PlayStation game, like right away. Like it looks like a PlayStation game. It plays and moves like a PlayStation game. That there are obvious issues. And funnily enough, I think that the games that tend to stand up a little bit better are actually games of the Super Nintendo era, because those are very specific, like bit graphic kind of game play. They have a specific visual look about them, whereas the first or second generation of 3D graphics don't necessarily make the cut anymore. Ashton writes, I'm not a fan of video game or video game culture. I sell them to feed myself, but I got to be honest, people don't exercise to game 10 plus hours a day. It's so unhealthy. They use gambling psyche. Oh yeah, all of that you just said there, Ashton, is absolutely true. All of that is absolutely true. Like it does tie in very much into our desire for escapism. I think this is absolutely true. Like, we definitely are struggling as a people with... There's a malaise that has come over the society, without a doubt, that we are kind of stuck in this. We don't know what to do. Everything is going to hell. And everything's getting worse, and everything's getting more ridiculous. And the scale of the escapism that exists now, that the escapism itself is becoming louder and bigger and more aggressive and more intense, and we're expecting more out of it, and we're literally creating alternative realities and alternative worlds where we get to actually slay evil because it actually makes us feel as though we're actually having an impact on something, and that the solutions in video games are often a lot easier, right? It's a lot easier to face solutions in a game like Diablo because it's like, there are zombies. Kill the zombies. Milo, buddy, I'm streaming. Come lie down, okay, buddy? Come hang out. You're a good boy. You're being a fussy butt, buddy. Come lie down. Come lie down. Like, I think that a big reason people do gravitate towards video games is that people want to solve problems. That it's part of the mental health of a person. That a person wants to be faced with a problem and then solve the problem, right? They want to do that. Even if the solution to the problem is just clear out these zombies, kill these zombies, right? People want to do that kind of thing. Obviously they do. We sell games that do this, right? And I think that really tells you, how bad our society has gotten and how bad the structure of the society has become. That we have video games to create problems for people to solve, instead of actually setting people onto the task of solving problems in the society, right? That there are obviously problems that exist within the society, and it all loops back around. It all loops back around, as it always does, to the bottlenecking of capital. That capital doesn't want the problem solved. Capitalism doesn't want to empower people to actually face the issues in the society, because if we actually did set people on the task of solving the problems that exist in the society, well, the very first thing that they would acknowledge is who the villain is, right? And who the villain of the piece is. And it's gotten pretty fucking obvious, right? It's gotten pretty fucking obvious who the villains of this piece actually are. Right, you got to be pretty fucking dim-witted to actually buy into the idea that these capitalists are actually on your side, right? Like, they're not on your side. And so I think there is this sort of general sense of helplessness that exists within people, and that people's day-to-day lives are existing in this state. Like, what's a big reason you guys are actually here? What's a big reason we all come together? What's a big reason that you're listening to me right now, right? You're listening to me right now because I give you emotional catharsis. That's the bottom line, is that you on your day-to-day life are living in a state of existential crisis. That's the truth, that the system of capital has alienated us from each other. The system of capital has alienated us from the natural world. It's isolated us, and so it has put in, and it attempts to normalize this. But you know that you're actually living in a state of crisis, and that all things are reflected by this state of crisis. And so video games and video game culture comes along and says, we're going to give you a reprieve. Just like the capitalists always do, they sell you the solution to the problem they create. And even though I enjoy video games, and even though I play video games myself, I think it pays to be aware that we are playing these games as a form of escapism from the day-to-day reality and the day-to-day helplessness of what it is to live under a capitalist death cult. And that if we actually lived in a society that said, oh, there are problems that you're facing, oh, let's fix these problems. What can we do? Like, let's put your energy towards solving these problems that exist in the society. Like, if that was a legitimate thing that was actually happening, I don't think we'd have much of a video game culture, right? Because life would be the video game. People would be putting their time and their effort into something that would actually benefit them, right? And because what do you expect to see when you play a video game? You expect that you're going to play and your character is going to get stronger and the plot's going to unfold and it's going to persist and there's going to be this unfolding kind of a thing. That's not what's happening in our society. We're caught in a feedback loop. We're caught in a loop, right? That we're caught in a cultural feedback loop. And that cultural feedback loop insists that the loop itself must be sustained and maintained. That's why we're constantly iterating on the same stories and the same ideas and the same thoughts and the same conversations over and over and over and over again. Because the essential belief amongst the populace and amongst the believers of capitalist realism is that as long as we keep iterating the same stories and the same ideas and the same concepts, then eventually we'll reach a type of perfection where the iteration will finally become complete and the system of capital will actually become good somehow. But it won't. It can't. It's not how the system of capital works. And the only way for us to get out of the loop is to destroy the loop. But we don't know how to do that. Or we're unwilling to do it. So, what do we do instead? Drugs, alcohol, pornography, video games. Right? Bread and circuses. Right? And eventually it'll stop working. Like, eventually the discontent and the malaise will stop working. Eventually the energy that it takes to actually keep these systems going will simply stop. Right? Like, we run out of fossil fuels. Right? We run out of resources. Like, we run out of this stuff. That the disasters that are coming to befall us are going to interfere. And we'll be faced with the hard reality that the issue is the system of capital and we should get rid of these guys. We should simply stop letting them be part of the conversation at all. Like, at all. They should just, like, they should be part of the conversation, but they should be part of the conversation insofar as, like, your mom is part of the conversation. Like, they can have a vote. They can stand up and say their piece. But the idea that these guys should, like, own major media outlets, the idea that we should cede the public airwaves to these people, it's just absolutely insane. So one of the craziest things that I actually think is happening in our society today is, like, the conservatives are about to take power. Well, one of the planks of the Conservative Party is the defunding of the CBC. And the absolute dimwits who are in favor of this actually think that, yeah, it's better to listen to your corporate overlords than it is to actually have the people you elect into positions of power have any voice whatsoever. Like, that's nuts. It's actually nuts to believe that we go to this great length to elect our leadership, but the people who should have the largest voice are the billionaires. Like, I think that that's a mental illness. Like, I think you actually have a mental illness if you think this way. That there's something wrong with the way you think. If you're actually telling me that we have this entire electoral system where we vote for our leaders, our prime minister, the people who are capable of creating our laws, but that they should not have any apparatus whatsoever by which to communicate meaningfully with the public. And that the people who actually do have those apparati to be able to communicate with the public should be slave owners. I think you have a mental illness. Methane writes, one thing I love Bethesda for, though, is all the mods for Skyrim and Fallout. Yeah, my criticism of that, though, is that I think Bethesda kind of knew that people were passionate about these games and were going to mod them. And so they half-assed a lot of stuff because they knew people were just going to create mods for them. You know? I think that does happen. And there's your capitalist innovation right there. Yeah. Exercise is important. Yeah. Well, and I do think that there are certain types of gameplay, like loot boxes, for example. Like, honestly, like the whole microtransaction kind of culture that exists, I straight up will stop supporting a studio if I see that they started doing that. That's there are game studios that I straight up have just been like, oh, you're starting to put in like microtransactions, and you're starting like these aren't expansions. These are like little microtransactions that you're putting in. You're starting to you're starting to build like loot boxes and that kind of stuff. Like this is the model that you're going towards. It's like a gambling kind of thing. I'll just straight up stop supporting a studio. Like I don't buy Paradox games anymore. I don't buy Ubisoft games. I don't buy Activision games. I don't buy EA games. I just don't buy them. Like I don't care. Like I don't care. Like I won't buy their stuff because their model is this addictive gambling kind of thing. Even if they come out with something that looks like it could be appealing, I just shrug and say like, yeah, but it won't be. Right? Like that's the kind of hard reality about a lot of these games, is that it's like sometimes I look at the game and I'm like, oh wow, that does actually look pretty interesting and pretty good. And then I just remember like, no, it won't. Right? Because the entire goal of the game is to get you into this sort of addictive gambling loop. And that's not fun. And so the skin that they've created to deceive you into the loop, while that might look appealing, it won't be. Right? And so I just think that the thing to do when it comes to game companies that decide to do this is that once they do it once, that's the end of them. It's over. Like you don't go back. Just be like, nope, hard stop. Not gonna participate. Because that's the bottom line. Like if we participate in it, they'll just keep doing it. And it's the same thing I've been saying about these shitty Disney movies. Like as long as you keep buying their garbage, they're just gonna keep producing garbage. I stopped playing video games when PS1 was out, and now I really suck at every one of them. I was probably never good at them. Good to see you, Demand Batter. Yeah, my escapism is sake anime. Yeah, everybody's got a thing. I really hope, by the grace of gods, it gets third season. Yeah, China keeps online gaming for kids down to 1 hour a day. Seems extreme. Well, to me, I actually think that's like. China just doesn't have the same culture that we have of like, freedom, freedom, free market, freedom, right? And like, it also doesn't have the same kind of like hyper individualistic capitalist idea where everybody has to go work for capitalists and kids are all latchkey kids, right? So like, I think that China, here in the West, we like to believe that what happened was China said, no, online gaming is bad, so we're going to clamp down on that. Whereas what it likely was parents themselves being like, hey, can we all just agree that like as a culture that we don't want our kids to be doing this 100% of the time, all the time, and so we can limit this as a culture together? Can we do that? And the Chinese government said, yeah, we can do that. So it's them responding to their own people, right? Because that's what the Chinese government actually does. It actually responds to their own people. And that's a foreign concept in the West. We're just so used to our government not responding to us that when we see a government that actually is responding, we have to assume it's authoritarian. We have to assume that. Because to actually acknowledge what might actually be happening, it would break our brains. I thought we were the greatest country in the world. Why do they have a government that's responding to them and we don't have a government that's responding to us when we're so great? Video game culture is pure dog shit and gamers should be forcefully educated. Well, and it doesn't help that there's definitely like the alt-right pipeline definitely exists in a lot of these gaming circles, right? That like it doesn't take a big giant genius to figure out that like CSIS and the CIA is interested in promoting a pro-military culture in games that are about going overseas and killing people, right? Doesn't take a big giant leap. Like if it amazes me that there are people in the discourse that think that doesn't happen. Yeah, you got these people saying the upcoming Lara Croft isn't pretty enough. They're doing the same to the new Mortal Kombat women characters. Like, there's this weird duality, man, that exists within the conversation, right? That like these women have to be pretty, but if they're topless, then that's a scandal. Like it's weird. Like it's just that's all. It's just strange. Generation Y Me with a $5 donation. Thank you, my man. I really do appreciate that, my man. I really do appreciate that. Hey, Ashton. Ashton writes 2 days sober. Hey, bud. I'm 2 months. I'm 2 months right now. So we're all on our own journey. Today was a real day. Today was like me having to kind of white knuckle it and basically just say, okay, gonna white knuckle this. Gonna not have a drink today. My guy is okay. None of that. None of that. I know you're just being playful, but I'm streaming, buddy, and people have earbuds in, and it's gonna have a go to Mikhail. Yep. I only hate the CCP and not the people. Proceeds to be racist to every Chinese player they meet in game. Yeah. Gamers literally calling China to be nuked if they could find their favorite dev. Made a deal. Yeah. Yeah, to hell with gamers. I would abolish video games if it shocked me those mushroom brains into something useful. Well, like, I also do think that video games, by their very nature, facilitate a very toxic environment. That the toxicity that exists in video game culture, there isn't really a countervailing force to it. That you can basically just treat people like total trash, and there's no negative consequence to it whatsoever, right? You can literally just act like an insane crate. Like there are certain games that I just will not play because the user base is obviously full of psychopaths, right? Or at least people acting like psychopaths. That if you just have a bad game, like if things are going bad for you, right? Instead of people just being like, I know, Milo. Instead of people just being like, oh, hey, rough game, eh? Or just like not saying anything at all. Like instead of anything like that, right? You just get completely shit on. And that's just part of the gameplay experience. You just have to deal with that. Yeah, League of Legends is brutal this way. I actually did go and play some League. For some reason, I got into like a real nostalgia space about League of Legends, like maybe a couple of months ago. And so I downloaded League of Legends, and I played it for maybe 2 weeks, on and off, before I realized that the game's actually total trash. Like, there's a reason why the people who play League of Legends are total trash. It's because the game itself is total trash. Like, it's a bad game. It's badly designed. It's badly balanced. It's a bad game. That it really is like the definition of just momentum. It just shows you that if you have momentum, if you're like the first people out the gate to be able to like strike while the iron's hot, you can go a really far distance. But if you're like someone like me who's coming into it later on, you can see pretty quickly that this is actually terrible. Like it's a bad game that needs to be redesigned. And there are games that have redesigned it and are better, right? They are better. But League of Legends has this enormous fan base attached to it because of the momentum of being the first one out the gate, right? It's why, like, so somebody like Joe Rogan, for example, right? Like, Joe Rogan's not like a god. He's not particularly intelligent. His stuff can be fairly interesting because he has interesting guests on. But the truth is that he's where he's at because of momentum. That he was just sort of the first guy through the gate. And when you're the first guy through the gate, you get to kind of be the one that goes. And then everybody else is the one that's sort of following behind, trying to figure out how to make it work within your wake. Right? I knew this was going to happen, guys. My dog is just like, play with me, play with me, play with me, play with me, play with me. Ow. Ow. Play nicer. Ow. Character. But, like, yeah. League of Legends literally, like, stand in a lane for 20 minutes playing whack-a-mole with, like, competitive whack-a-mole. If you step out of line, like, a hair's breadth, you're going to instantly lose the lane, and so you're going to stand in lane and have a shit game for 20 minutes. And then the minute you actually get into a position where you can actually start having, like, better interaction with your teammates, everybody just surrenders. And so the game ends. And that's how it goes. That's the whole game. And if it's not an instant surrender, then it's like a 50-minute game experience. It's a slow grinding death spiral towards a victory or a loss. Like, it's not an interesting or fun experience. And so the people who are playing that game are the, like, saddest people I think that are alive. That they have decided to commit their time to something that is objectively terrible. This is the thing I think that's really interesting about our quote-unquote culture, is that we have really doubled down and decided that things that are terrible, things that are actually objectively bad, are the things that we should elevate and venerate to the very top of our quote-unquote culture. Like, we actually think Star Wars is serious. We actually think that, like, Disney movies are serious. Like, we just keep doing this, where we just keep making garbage. And it's not like we're iterating on it and making it better. You know? It's not like the live action Disney movies came out and were good. You know? It's not like the new Star Wars movies came out and were actually good. It's not like The Mandalorian came out and were actually interesting and actually had something interesting to say, right? Like, we're in such a enormous desert. We're in a cultural desert, so much so that the most interesting piece of media that has actually come out in, like, the last 10 years, or at least since, like, Joker, was the Barbie movie. And the reason why that's the case is because they actually had something to say. They actually were like, hey, let's say something interesting about the culture that we live in, right? It's not just proto-fascist propaganda for children, right? It's not teaching kids that Tony Stark is the future and you should just get used to the idea of having tech billionaire arms dealers be the ones that you defer to when crisis occurs, right? Like, that's essentially what the Avengers taught us, right? That's the message of the Avengers, is that during times of crisis, the people that we should defer to are private tech billionaire arms dealers. Those are the people who are in charge. Those are the people who are in control, that their intelligence is unquestionable, that we should not under any circumstances question the motives or the intelligence of people like, let's say, Elon Musk, especially during periods of crisis. That during periods of crisis, we should defer to their overt, obvious intellect. For God's sakes, Tony Stark invented time travel. He invented time travel in a week. Mandalorian, man, like... Mandalorian was brilliant for one reason and one reason only. That Baby Yoda. Okay, buddy. Baby Yoda was brilliant. Like, Baby Yoda was straight up genius. Take one of the most popular characters in the franchise and just do a baby version of it. Like, I worked in a toy store during that period of time. Do you know what the number one toy that we sold during that period of time was? It was Baby Yoda. No doubt. Not the kids wanted it, the parents wanted it, everybody wanted Baby Yoda. I could not keep Baby Yoda on the shelves, right? And so my perspective of The Mandalorian was always that was essentially a toy commercial. Like, that's it. Like, The Mandalorian was always just a toy commercial. So they didn't need to hire writers. They didn't need to hire anybody. Like, they were just doing toy commercials, basically. My pug is more entertaining than Yoda. Well, I mean, my pug is like super, super playful right now. I haven't seen him in like a week and a half, and I knew that he was going to come in and ruin today's stream, but... Maybe that applies more to the later seasons. It really fell off. They were milked. Yeah, of course. Again, I think it all flows into just like there isn't, like, we don't have a culture. Ruin the stream? Nonsense. Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad you guys are not thinking that Milo is ruining the stream. That makes me feel a lot better. Oh, he's a good boy. Like, The Mandalorian has a really, like, spaghetti western sort of feel about it, right? That's its whole shtick. It's got this spaghetti western formula. But, like, formula is the word, right? Like, Mando shows up to a place in order to stock up his ship. Somebody says, hey, if you really want that stock up, I've got this job where you need to go kill a gangster / monster / creature of some kind. Mando goes, kills the monster / creature / gangster of some kind, while Baby Yoda does a cute thing, right? Oh, Baby Yoda did a cute thing, but got captured. Now we have to save Baby Yoda while defeating the monster / gangster. And oh, look, we did it. And then we come back and we refuel the ship and we go. It's very formulaic. Like, it's very, very formulaic. And I mean, I don't think there's anything intrinsically wrong with that. I think that there's a lot of shows that follow like a pretty clear formula. But it doesn't mean it should be the heart of the culture. You know? Like, it doesn't mean it should be what we all care about. Milo, my man. You guys, I'm just going to show you what I'm dealing with here with this guy. Look at this. Look at this kid. Look at this kid. Look what I'm having to deal with. Hey, there he is. Look what he's doing. He's just like being a little scamp. He just needs pets and love. That's what he needs. And he just wants to like bury his face into my knee. That's what he's all about. Look at this kid. Look at this friggin' guy. What a... This guy. Oh, I know, Milo. Oh, I know. Guys, I think I actually have to take care of Milo. I think I gotta take him down. I think I gotta give him some pets and some love. I think he's demanding it, and I think he has derailed the stream. I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna call it. I know that I'm ending early again, and I apologize for that. We'll go the full distance tomorrow, guys. Always remember, okay? Each and every one of you is a quantum being living in quantum energy. The billionaire class is spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little you'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.